I was so disillusioned at one point. I turned to Nigel Worthington and said, I'll just stop playing football. I'm Robert Green, and this is My Norwich City Story. I played for a Sunday league team, Woking Boys, which my old man run, and with his mate. We had a really good side, and we ended up playing in what was then the Canary Cup, and we won that with our Sunday league team, and I think we beat some good Rangers and beat Sheffield Wednesday in the final, and so got scouted from there and went up for a trial, and off the back of the trial signed. I think I signed the week after they beat Bayern Munich. In Germany, and it's gone downhill for the club ever since. So that was kind of at the time, and I think at the time and before, this is obviously before academies and stuff like that. They took you on when they're courting you as a club, and they wanted you to sign. They took you around the club and on a tour, and one of the more sort of memorable moments was. You compare it to the London clubs and the clubs that are interested there and stuff like that. It's not as an impressive a ground as, say, going around White Hart Lane or wherever it might be or Highbury at the time. but they take you in at one point. They say, "Here's the team photo," and it's the full squad, and they go, "He's from the academy from the youth team system. He's from the youth team system," and it was something like 75% of the players at the time. You think, well, I've got a chance. I've probably got more of a chance here than anywhere else, and it's a very different setup nowadays, where you have, the likes here at Chelsea, where you have hundreds of boys signed up. You had sort of for your age group maybe 10, tops, and you had another age group of age above, and when you went to full time at 16, and that was it. You had 20 boys, and you had a fighting chance of getting a 1-year professional contract at the age of 18. So, I signed there, and I used to travel up with boys. We'd meet up at Liverpool Street and travel up every weekend to Norwich and go all around the country playing on a Sunday morning, and then going home, sort of doing your homework on the way home, sort of on a Sunday afternoon, and that was your weekend gone. And it was that's kind of half a test of dedication needed to make that step into professional football. So, I loved it, and I loved the sort of the experience. I loved going into London, getting on the tube, going, doing that sort of thing. So it was an exciting time for me as a kid. I got injured at 14 at what was then the Lillishall National School of Football, and was out for 2 years with a broken back. And sort of the club stuck by me, paid for my operation, which I had done in the old Norfolk and Norwich, and they really, they looked after me because they considered me a prospect. And so, in that regard, I could have been left on my own. I could have been sort of left to fend for myself, and in that respect, I owe a lot to a club and to the then. Gordon Bennett, who was the youth development officer, and Colin Watts, who fought my corner and really said, put their reputations on the line, saying he's going to come good for us. It's worth doing. And so, it was something I shall remember for, as long as I'm around anyway. So it was an exciting time, and something that I up until getting injured and being out for the 2 years, I really enjoyed the. It was tough, but as a 12-year-old, sort of leaving home on a Saturday morning, afternoon, and not getting home till Sunday night, it was tough, but good at the same time.
You're always going to be a goalkeeper?
Couldn't run. Yeah. Still can't. I'm probably something. I'd like to think it was something to do with a broken back, and which is now all fused together. But it's yeah, it was just something that I think it was when I was 8 years old. Well, someone asked my old man and said, "Well, when did you know Robert was being a professional footballer?" And he said, "When he was 8." So, and that's when I started playing in goal. So it's been plain sailing ever since. Yeah, no, but it's no, but that was sort of my, that was my position. I'd just always done it. We had a good youth team. When I was 16, the year above was year of, there was Craig Bellamy, Chris Llewellyn, Adrian Forbes, Adrian Coote, numerous players who made it up into the first team, but good players who didn't make it. And I think, had the other players been in other years, they may have got a chance. But I think and so from my particular age group, there's Darren Way was one lad who obviously is still in football. He had cut short, quite brutally in his career, but obviously moved into management, and up until recently was a manager. And so, for prolonged periods, for such a good side we had, for people who had what you would consider a full career in football, it's very hard to maintain that, and people find different ways around their careers in football, but it just goes to show you need a lot of luck on your side and things to fall for you, and I'm still going at the age of 39, which is kind of, it's a small miracle in itself. So yeah. Keith Webb was there doing the youth team. I mean, it's just so different then as it is to now. You look at the academy structures and stuff like that. You had a coach, maybe an assistant, and on a Saturday a physio, and that was it. And Keith would run the whole youth team system on his own, and he was no self-professed, no expert in goalkeeping, but obviously helped me as much as he could, and really sort of helped the boys as much as he could, and took great pride in his team, and a real very disciplined ethos towards it, and it is, and that sort of thing instilled you as what you took into sort of your professionalism and beyond as a sort of a young man and going into your late teens. And from there, I think Steve Foley came in and did youth team and moved up into the first team, and he's someone who took great pleasure in helping the younger lads particularly, and someone who I took to and really enjoyed playing under in the reserves and moving up. So from that, those guys, I'm going to probably do people disservice by not mentioning them, but we didn't have a full-time goalkeeper coach. Martin Thomas used to come in, who was one of the England goalkeeper, sort of the under 16s and 18s goalkeeper coach, would come in one day a week, and that was it really. And we were left to learn for ourselves with me and Brian Gunn was obviously the senior professional, and Andy Marshall was the up and coming one in between us, and you kind of learn him through mistakes, through experience, through games, and that was it really. And so in that regard, it was different, but it grounded you quick, and you learnt quick, and you weren't pandered to, and you weren't really sort of you weren't protected in any way, shape or form. Okay. Wow. As I said, oh, I've got a ring on. Don't know what I'm doing with a ring on. That's fast. You want me to comment on these?
Not all that bad.
Yeah, I think that's it's a fundraising for the players. Daryl, is he a year younger than me, I think, in the youth team, and we sort of came through at a similar time. I think he actually made his debut quite young, didn't he? But yeah, I hated doing things like that. It was just, I just didn't want any publicity. I didn't want to do anything I just wanted to go to work and do my stuff. And ever since, I think it always catches me out when I'm not talking about that photo now because it's so bad, but it always surprises me when people speak to me in a manner that they feel like they know me, because I don't know them, and even at my age now, it still catches me out, and I probably come across as rude or aloof in that regard, but I'm just like, why are you speaking to me? And so yeah, and I think in my facial face there behind it, I'm thinking, God, get me out of here as soon as you can. I moved up to Norwich when I was 16, and I decided to stay at school and do my A-levels. And I went, and by the time I was 17 in January, I hadn't been to school for about a month, because I was doing the youth team, playing for the youth team, playing for the reserves, and travelling with the first team. And as what was then the sub keeper, but there was only 3 subs, so they never put a goalkeeper on the bench, and you were cooking the meals on the back of the bus and on the way home after games, and you're getting up and you think, oh, on a Wednesday morning, I should have been at school for 2 days. I haven't been at school, and I've got to get up at 9, having got home at 4, and then there's a reserve team game the next night and stuff like that. And I turned to my dad and I said, I'm so far behind my schoolwork. I can't carry this on. I don't know what to do. This is, it is too much. Because of the way the club was, you just didn't have any, and we didn't have any goalkeepers. And I think Andy Marshall went out on loan somewhere, Gillingham or something like that. And then one of the other young goalkeepers got injured, and there was just me. And I think the first game I went to was lost 6-4 at West Brom on a Tuesday night. And then the next game was 7-1 at Port Vale or something. I just thought, this is a disaster. What's going on? I think it's caused it was a tough time for the club, but I think funds were at an all-time low, and it was just before Delia came in and saved them, and was it the sale of Mike Sheeran from Stoke to QPR, or vice versa, saved the club by putting in 40 grand or something. So there was a real sort of difficult time, but it gave young players a chance, and I was all of a sudden thrown into this situation where you're just like involved in every team. And yeah, it was tough, but I turned to the school. My old man came up for a meeting with the school and said, look, what do we do? And they said, well, we're here to give your son a future. He's got one, go for it. And I signed professional forms then. And just because of the nature of the club, you're in and around the first team the whole time, really. So it was great in that regard.
Just talking about your debut, came against Ipswich, didn't it? Goalless draw, got clean sheet on your debut against Ipswich. I mean, and I think it was because Andy got injured, wasn't it? So it was quite a shock. What do you remember about how that all came about? He got
sent off against Huddersfield, and Daryl Such went and goal for about 80 minutes and played a blinder. I think we drew 1-1. All I remember of that, sat there. I wasn't one of the subs, so I was sat on the bench, and Bruce Rioch just turned around shouting at me, that's how you do it, that's how you do it. What? You've never seen me play. I don't. So anyway, but because he was suspended, it came up, that you knew the game was coming, and the build-up was there, and it's obviously a big game for everybody, and it was a sleepless few nights before, and yeah, it was for me a great occasion, but one that I remember just going home and going to sleep straight after the game. I was just so nervous, and so the nervous energy that it took out of me. I think it's such a big game for that area. In terms of the rest of the country, there are geographically and demographically bigger derbies, and closer proximity-wise. But in terms of you've lived in that area for 2-3 years, and that's pretty much all everybody talks about, and that was a big occasion. And one of the things that stuck in my mind was, we were training the day before and just mucking around, and I made a mistake with something, and one of the players turned to me and said, if you make a mistake tomorrow, I'm going to kill you. And that kind of stuck with me, and I thought, well, I better not. And so as part of the game, I think I broke Matt Jackson's nose towards the end. Head butted him coming out for a ball, and I was not angry at the end of the game, but I remember calling for it and just watching the ball and going up to edit, and he was there all of a sudden, and watching it on replay, he was clearly waving to me to stay in the goal, but I just eyes on the ball, and that he was angry and I was angry at the end of the game. Well, what are you doing? So anyway, hindsight being, could have just left stayed in the goal and let him deal with the ball, but such is life, and we both lived. But it was a memorable occasion, and something that I enjoyed the game, but yeah, as I said afterwards, I just shattered and went home and went to sleep. Brave man. By that point, we'd had a goalkeeper coach, Malcolm Webster, had come in for sort of 1 day a week, and he'd do Ipswich 2 days a week, Kelvin Davis at Luton 1 day a week, and us 1 day a week. And Ipswich all of a sudden, I think, got promoted, and then had an amazing season. The first that first season, and ended up qualifying for Europe. And off the back of it, Richard Wright had a move to Arsenal, and kind of ended his time at Ipswich and created a hole. And Marsh went there as on a free transfer, so it made sense for everybody. It just so happened that he played for Norwich prior, and something that I'm sure the Ipswich fans didn't forget. And I remember playing against him in a derby and thinking, he's getting it from both angles here, So yeah, and I was fortunate that at the end of the season, when we knew Marsh was leaving, that I went in to see Nigel Worthington, and I said to him, look, all I've ever asked for in my career is a chance. And he said, well, you'll get a chance. And he was good as his word. And it was, that first season, I was very fortunate. I also didn't demand, but put a forceful request in that we got a full-time goalkeeper coach. I said, I'm a young goalkeeper. I'm learning my trade. It's going to be tough for me. I just need someone with me every day to help guide me through it. And they got Paul Crichton in, who's an experienced, been around the Championship a long time, and sort of help lighten not the mood, but just through his character and just through being. It's kind of, because there's not many of you, there's sort of a youngster, there's 3 or 4 of you plus including the goalkeeper coach. It's a small group, so he'd be able to lighten the mood, and especially after defeats or something like that, and me being a youngster. But James Holman came in and spent a number of years at the club. Sort of, he was a lad from Ipswich, and he sort of took the chance to come in and really help me out. And it just that training every day sort of was priceless for me. And so, yeah, that first season was to go and play as many games as I did. By the end of the season, it was just so draining, but so amazing at the same time. And for the manager, it was his, I think he'd been manager of Blackpool previous, but his big chance as a manager to come and just put this confidence in me was fantastic, and something that I'll always be grateful for. Yeah, sneaking into the playoffs, Wolves was the away game of Wolves was brilliant, and we lost, but went through. But just the atmosphere, the arrogance of Wolves, sort of, I remember the comments in the programme before the game were something of, it was almost to the point of, we have a divine right to be promoted, and we should not be dealing with these playoffs and this other side, whoever they might be. By the way, it might be Norwich. It was kind of not disrespectful, but I read the programme and went, wow, okay, there's motivation for us. And it was such a great atmosphere, and then to go, the only thing I like about it, obviously losing, but on penalties, but I'd love for it to be at Wembley, and the old Wembley, but obviously can't change that. But it was, I'd like to have played at both, but circumstances dictated that had gone, and yeah, in the end, it was so big and such a big opportunity. Whether we were ready as a team, I think we were quite a long way off being a Premier League team. You know, if we'd have got promoted, the next season could have been quite painful. But just to get there and to give the players that belief for a couple, the players involved, including myself, in the future, just to say, look, you can do it and you can get close. It was, the older players, I think it hit harder. That they thought, well, that was our final chance to get into the Premier League, maybe. But for the younger players, it's kind of like, well, it's such a, in an ironic sense, such a morale boosting way to end a season that you're there, and I think just that lack of, there was one or two of us were just that bit younger, and you look around that side, when you looked at me, maybe a couple of the boys who were taking the penalties were still kids, really, and that may have made a difference in the final throws. But as experiences go, playing in a huge stadium, huge occasion, and the side playing well and competing and everything, it was a great time to be at the club.
There was actually a civic reception, wasn't there, after that? Even though you didn't go up, you might not remember it, but I think there was something at City Hall where it was a...
My memory's not too sharp with these sort of things. Yeah, anything involving public receptions or anything like that, they're dreaded. Yeah, especially as a kid. As a young man, it wasn't small talk and civility and sort of idle chat. With strangers wasn't my thought, sort of thing. The Jeff Horsfield say, the only thing I remember doing it, and with his goal after, it came to him, and I remember thinking, he's got to put it in the corner, because I saved the last one when he tried to put it back across me, and if I'd have done the same again, I'd have saved it, and we might not have got promoted. But I can still remember it now, running across a goal, going, I've just got to dive, and if I'd have just stopped and stayed like I did with the previous one, I probably would have saved it, although it was a bit closer. But that's football. And it's ifs and buts, and you're making a decision on 0.2 of a second sort of instincts. That's the moment that stuck in my mind from it. It wasn't the save. It was sort of being the sort of looking back and being a keeper. You kind of think, well, what about the one that went in? And you thought, well, if I'd have just stood there, perhaps I would have saved it. Never know. That's a photo of me stood next to Kreitz in a team lineup of, what year would that be? I have no idea.
3-4.
There's a promotion season. I think me and Ewan have seen the same thing. I don't know what it is, but we're the more observant out of the whole team. But it took, I don't know how long and how many meetings to get elbow pads taken out the shirts. It seems bonkers now that you had elbow pads that did absolutely nothing but restrict you in the goal. And I stood there and I said, I don't want elbow pads in the shirts. And they must have had, I don't know how many meetings with whoever the kit manufacturer was at the time. And they said, we can't do anything about it. So just take the blooming elbow pads out here. So yeah. Every season, and it was quite good actually, every season at Norwich and at West Ham, they turned to me and said, what colour kit do you want? And I'd say grey or black, and we just alternate. And if you need another one, it was green. And they say you just alternate between. And so the reason for Norwich's kits for a vast number of years, goalkeeper kits being green, grey or black, was because that's what I wanted. And you go back to when Gunny used to, as bright as possible, there's many colours. They were horrific. So yeah, that's why they were really boring and grey. It was because I asked them to be. Obviously we had talent up front, and the big difference I think was going out in January, whenever it was at Christmas, and making the signings that we did. All of a sudden you had options, and we talked about playing for Leeds earlier, a couple of years ago, and we were up there again, and we said experienced players went to the senior, the sort of executives of the club at the time and said, we need help. We're running out of numbers. We need backup. We're gonna crash and burn soon. You know, we've got 11, 12 lads playing every game, and it's a physical league. And sure enough, we crashed and burned and fell out of the playoffs. But you look at that side, and Delia and Michael Wynne-Jones were fantastic, and they just went, what do you need? And within the reasons of the means that they can, they went and got what they could. And you know, Leon and Matt Svensson coming in, obviously, as Darren Huckabee staying was, you know, I think it was a canny move by the manager. He went and got us in a position to, you know, got Crouchy in, got Darren Huckabee in, and got us in a position to go and say, like, well, we're up here now, it's down to you. And he really put it on their toes in that regard, and they backed it. And I think, you know, I think you look at the back five. I think between us is Mark Edworthy missed a few games, but other than that, we played every game. And you know, Malky and Flem and Adam Jury, I think we missed something like, I think they missed 3 games, 4 or 5 games between all of them. And you think, you know, whether the steadiness of a back five or it comes with success, or success comes with the steadiness of a back five, you're never really quite sure. But I think that was a huge thing. You just, you know, there was times you just turn around, look at each other, the fivers, and go, right, this is down to us today. We're just not going to concede. That's all it is. And sometimes it was, how many times do you remember in the Championship playing, going, this is an amazing football game? Over the course of the season where you win the league, 2 or 3 out of 46. You know, none of them are ever going to be beautiful games of football, really. And it's a case of winning. And you know, we by the end, you thought it was pretty tight, and by the end, we, you know, mathematically we cruised it, really. So it was a fantastic achievement. But I think it was off the back of quite shrewd political moves by the manager, really, putting the club on the position that they did, and then putting the onus on them at a crunch time, and they came up trumps, which is credit to everyone involved, really. It was a new dimension. It was something that, like, a lot of us had never faced, and that first season, in the Premier League, again, it was a bit like the playoffs, that having had players with the lack of experience that we had, it kind of, I'm sure probably there was games in there that we would have won had we'd had a couple of seasons of Premier League football. You were looking around going, hold on a minute, these teams aren't playing any better than us, but we're losing games here. And it was just key moments that didn't go our way. And you look back, and the one that will always stick with me was Ledley clearing one off the line from Darren Huckabee at Spurs, and we'd have then a 0-0 draw, and that was early in the season. And I just think that bit of belief with a away win at White Hart Lane would have changed the season in that regard. It didn't come, and we ended up season without, obviously going down the last day, but not winning an away game, which was, you know, the one big thing that you look at and go, you know, that probably would have won us that game had Ledley not been as quick as he is and as good as he is. But you know, that's Premier League football, and that's playing against some of the best players in the world.
I mean, Dean Ashton came in January, didn't he? And most perceived wisdom is if he'd been there from the start of the season, it would have been a different matter as well.
Possibly, yeah. You know, you never really know with things like that. I think Delia and Michael did what they could do at the time, and you know, I think they put all their money in when they could. It was a record signing by a long way, and he was a fantastic player. I obviously played with him at West Ham and after, and it was something that he brought a new dimension, and also he's a better player than everyone else, the bottom line. And you know, you fill your team with better players, you pay more money, you stay up. We didn't have that. We were doing with what we could with what we had, and you know, that's maybe what we're talking about. The experience, that the quality comes into it as well. And so yeah, it's a I never really looked at it like that, but yeah, you can't really put your finger on it in that regard. But he scored a lot of goals in that running and proved a handful for a lot of teams. And he was, you know, he's one of the lads. He's a lad with, I think, probably the hardest shot I've ever had to face, and so quite a lot of weight behind it as well. Not as much as he has now, but yeah. So it's something that he was a, you know, a big factor of giving us an opportunity of staying up.
Don't worry, we'll make sure Dean sees that.
Oh, please do. I'll try to block it out. Thanks. No, look, I think we could have been about 2-0 up. We had a goal disallowed, which no one understood why, and a blatant penalty turned down. And you look at moments and you look at things like that, and you know, I never looked at that game as the reason why we went down. You know, by half time we were 2 down or something like that, and I think virtually went with 6 up front. I think that's the reason why we lost 6-0, rather than the fact that, you know, if we were 2-0 down at half time, we tried, you know, we just went for it, and it was. But I look at moments like Ledley King making a save on the line as a greater moment than that final game. All I remember was seeing at the end of the game being absolutely mortified and going out to clap the fans and seeing Joe Lewis in the middle, being a giant freak that he is, sort of just stood there roaring with laughter. What are you doing? That's the bit that stuck in my. I was like virtually close to tears, and he's there just crying with laughter. I was like, oh, cheers, mate. Yeah. But again, that sort of game, you just looked at their team. You look at Fulham's side, and they had a team full of internationals, experienced players, stuff like that, and we didn't. And that was probably one of the reasons for that story of that season. I think I've got that picture, yeah, at Fulham. I think my parents have got it, yeah. It's a good one. Kind of, yeah, he's what, I'm not sure what to add other, you know, it was kind of, I assume by the manner of me sitting there is that it's not the first goal or the second, it's kind of number 4 or number 5 or number 6, and just, you know what, I think I've just blanked it out from my mind because it was such desperately sad, sort of, it was so close to doing so well when we, like you say, we were on such a good run, and to hit that one, and you know, we'd given ourselves a lifeline, and then, you know, absolutely crashed and burned, and it was, I don't know, I just felt at that time going back to the Championship felt like a disaster, really.
That summer it must have been difficult, having been relegated, and of course then the following season was hard too. So did you stay a season too long? Was it too much? Were there difficult decisions to be made at that point?
For me, on a personal level, I think the walls were closing in on me in terms of living in Norwich, and it was difficult, and I know it's a wonderful part of the world, and it's, you know, I was 24, 25 by this point, and had spent the best part, nearly 10 years living there. My mates who I'd made there had all gone off to university and chosen to come back, and I was there, and I couldn't do anything. I was there for 50 weeks of the year and working there full time, and you know, as a young man, it was kind of, I was in my early 20s, a young single bloke just wanting to go off and experience different stuff. And it became a real sort of issue with me as it was, as much as it was living in the place, as it was sort of on a professional level, as much as anything. And I remember sort of doing an interview after leaving and going to West Ham, and I think it was Alan Smith, and I said Norwich is a city the size of a town with a small with a village mentality, and I meant that in a positive and a negative sense. But obviously, the more or the longer I had lived there, the more I just felt like you couldn't get out and you were stuck. And and by the end, it was, I think, towards the end, I think I remember my dad going to see Nigel Worthington and as a social function at the end of one of the seasons, and he said Portsmouth had already made a bid for me and the club had asked for crazy money. I knew Tottenham were trying to buy me at a time, and again they were asking for just an unparalleled amount of money, and it was frustrating in that regard, because you've seen these clubs and Premier League clubs, and as much as I had a regard for the club and the place, it was kind of, this is, opportunities in London, and for me as a person, more than anything, just to go and try something different. And my dad turned to Nigel Washington at this function. He said, "Can't you see you're ruining my son's life with this? He's so frustrated. He's sort of, he needs something else in his life now. Football's not bringing just the sole purpose of his life. It's something bigger than that." And to be fair to Nigel, I turned around and said, "Well, I think it's time he goes." And so, on a personal level, I think as much as anything, it was just that sort of, I don't know. I know friends up there who've lived there all their lives and have been happy there all their lives, and I understand that. That's not me. And I know I've come from Surrey, I've moved up there, I've come back to London, and it's been a great experience, and that's something that, if I'd have stayed there, I don't know whether what would have happened, but it's something I couldn't have done. And I think just on a personal sense, it was as much as anything. So in that regard, yeah.
Your England debut came while you were at Norwich. How, that moment, where does that rank in terms of your career? It's
funny because you're so wrapped up in it, and like at the time I was so much more intense as a person that I was so focused. It was playing Colombia in America is kind of about as meaningless as it gets for international games, and in a friendly, and it was something. But I was so focused and so intense that I didn't think to remember anything from it. And I just remember that being a second half sub, sitting and watching in a sort of Perspex substitute dugout in the New York heat for an hour before coming on. I was probably about 2 stone lighter than when I started the game, and I was so nervous, and it was so tough just sitting there and watching this game, going, I'm coming on. And it was just going, and by the end of the game, again, it was just a massive relief, really, that it happened, and it was sort of, it was great in that, to get it, to be one of, what was it at the time, 6 players, I think, at Norwich, to have played for England, shows, I'm sure there are more than 6 players who should have played for England at the time. I think John Ruddy's added to it, but other than that, there's a lot of players who possibly should have played in it. Historically, people always said it's tougher for players to move from Norwich because no one travels there to scout the players. It's so far out of the way. If you live in Manchester, you're not going to drive to Norwich. You're going to drive to Preston or Burnley or Blackburn or to watch those games. So for England, historically, it's tougher for people to play for England for Norwich because no one really watches them play. This is before TV took over. So, so it was a great and I was, very touched that, more so now than probably at the time, that Delia presented a commemorative cut glass gift, which I didn't think much of at the time, but having been around football for 20 odd years now and never been given so much as a thumbs up afterwards from a club, you realise what it meant to the club, and that sort of thing. Everyone, how much of a community thing and how much everyone was in it together as a club. Is that before 2006 World Cup, I assume? Yeah. And in a bit of trying to do a lot of gym work, I've been taking a lot of creatine, and I think that aided in snapping my groin, but you can see in my face that I've got a lot of water retention, and kind of in hindsight probably wouldn't have done that, and maybe not have got the injury that I got. But yeah, going to the World Cup was very exciting. Being involved, and it's just such a big thing. Being selected was massive, but just the sense of occasion, the sense of being amongst players who were superstars in their own right, and to have that taken away was tough. But you just move on so quickly, because you've just got to get fit, and that was it. And you just got to move on, got to get fit, and so you kind of, your focus goes on to something else, your energy is going on to something else, which is, that's football, that's life. And you spend a lot of time in football never really processing stuff, mentally processing stuff, and bury it to the back of your mind, bury the disappointment, and move on. And so that's one of those occasions, and it was, again, a photo opportunity. I look like I'd rather be anywhere else in the world, really. So with hindsight now, you talk about sort of moving on, and I think some sort of symmetry with my time at West Ham, that in the first team I was both for 6 years and played pretty much an identical number of games for the first team. And I think in myself that in both instances I needed a new challenge, and that's what came about. And I think I've always looked back fondly at Norwich as a club. I don't think you can't. There's it's, as everyone says, it's everyone's most fans' second favourite club, and it's with good reason. And I think its identity, how it goes around. I think the owners, in terms of being good people, doing what they think is right for the club, with an open and honest policy, is true to the club and true to the fans, and I think the public perception is of that. And my time at Norwich is, I look back and I got a nice letter from Neil Doncaster, the former chief exec, after an article I did in the paper, and he wrote a really nice letter to me, and I wrote back and said, out of all the clubs I've been at, Norwich wasn't the biggest, but it was the best run, and also probably the most honest. And you kind of, at the end of it, you kind of deal with people how you want to be dealt with, and I think the club did that, and from what I can tell, are carrying on doing so. And so yeah, I look back at it now, and I think they gave me an opportunity. They stuck by me when a lot of clubs wouldn't. They gave me an opportunity when a lot of clubs wouldn't, and despite my own personal sort of professional personal issues of wanting to move on, it's something that was something that was down to me. That was down to me, not the club, and that was my own personal issues as opposed to anything wrong with the club. And I think, you know, as long as Delia and Michael are in charge and they've got the good people around them, then the club's always got a chance of A, being they save the club for starters, and B, you know, being held in such high regard, and as do I. Your Norwich City hero. You got any Norwich City heroes? It has to be Gordon Bennett. Yeah, has to be. Just solely for, he used to stand on the side of the pitch and scream at the boys, "Fiver for a diver," he'd say in this Bristolian accent, and if you scored a diving header he'd give you £5. I mean, he's a genius and an absolute, you know, character. But yeah, it'd have to be Gordon Bennett. Tell us something we don't know about your Norwich spell. Come on, tell me something I don't know about my Norwich spell. I used to live in a place called, it was spelt Costessi, but Cossi, yeah. And there was a snooker club there, and I used to go down there with my mate and play snooker just to get out the house, but somewhere quiet, and they didn't know who I was. And then someone recognised me in there and started talking to me, and I never went back there again. When did it nearly end early for you at Norwich? I remember Brian Hamilton didn't want to keep me when he was manager. And I know that the people in the Steve Foley and Keith Webb and people behind the scenes fought for me to stay. And then another point was, this could apply for you, tell us something if you don't know. I was so disillusioned at one point, I turned to Nigel Worthington and said, "I'll just stop playing football." And it took a lot of soul searching, a long time for me to come to the fact that, you know, I should carry on, and you know, I take back what I said, but in the heat of the moment, at one point, I think it was possibly when Portsmouth had tried to buy me, and I just felt like I didn't want to, you know, it was too much, and mentally I'd gone with the situation, and I nearly walked away. Yeah, that was another moment. Your favourite Norwich City moment or memory? It's difficult because I was just so intense as a person then. I just didn't really enjoy anything, like like it was always like getting promotion. I was there focused on next season. One of the favourite memories was probably that last 10-15 minutes at Molineux in the playoff semi-finals when they scored and the whole place kicked off. It was going mental, and yeah, just looking across, and I think the Norwich fans were all below the Wolves fans, and they were just getting pelted with star photos, and it felt like a proper intense atmosphere. And yeah, that, and then probably going to win at Portman Road was a good one in the promotion season, and beating Manchester United at home, that was another one. That was another good one. Yeah, there's a few when I think about it. Yeah. Who do you miss? I miss my big poster, my big painting of Alan Partridge. My wife won't let me have that up in my house. Yeah, I had a 12-foot Alan Partridge painting done in his tracksuit and jogging shorts, well above it saying, "Would you like me to lap dance for you?" But yeah, that's probably out of everyone. Who don't you miss? Oh, you mentioned so many already. Well, I spent more time with Dean Ashton afterwards, and I'm sure he doesn't miss me. We played a horrendous game at Ewood Park, and we won 1-0. And Dean Ashton, he missed an open goal from 6 yards, and then scored an open goal from 6 yards, and got man of the match. And we won 1-0 after all the lads at the back had fought, scrapped, and just, done everything. I was so disillusioned at the end of the game. Like, we were being interviewed, and like, we obviously won. We were delighted that we won, and they said, "Oh, Rob, can you present Dean with the Man of the Match award?" I was like, hold on a minute. I thought I was going to get it, and it said, "Oh no, there you go, Baldy, nice one." And live on Sky, and he didn't realise until we got on the bus, and he was getting messages on his phone. He's hold on a minute. So, yeah, I wouldn't put anybody, but I'm sure Dean doesn't miss me. Yeah. My Norwich City regret. To not enjoy it as much as I should have done. It's because you're in it at the time, and it's normal for you, and it's normal because it's happening to you. It's not special in that regard. And you look back now, and it was the first season, getting to the playoffs final was the first season of success for such a long time. They had so many difficult years, so many tough years of, financially, ownership, Robert Chase, and then no one, and virtual administration, and that sort of stuff, for actual get sort of just a bit of momentum behind the club, to have enjoyed it more. And I'm sure pretty much most of my teammates would have said I was proper miserable throughout it all, and just to have relaxed and enjoyed it was not something that I was probably capable of doing at the time. Was the grass greener? Boom. For me, it was just new challenges, and the personal side was I just needed to experience a different place. And so the grass greener thing is, it probably was. And going back to London, going back to being relatively an anonymity about myself, and walking around London, without the being watched, or feeling like I was being watched, is probably a better sense of how it felt. It was just something that I really sort of enjoyed. And I remember going back in a pre-season friendly and playing for West Ham and against Norwich at the time, and it were just head and shoulders better than Norwich at that moment in time. And I felt more a part of that West Ham team then, and I was so pleased to be part of it that it was kind of, we were full of quality players, and I felt a part of it. And I thought, well, going on and moving on was kind of inevitable, but also Norwich spent a couple of years suffering. Went down to League One and that. So it kind of, in that regard, it kind of answers itself. Your message to the Norwich City fans. Hope you're well. It's a fantastic club. It's got people at the heart of it, and surrounded by it with the best intentions for the club. It's a real club of the community, and something that I probably didn't appreciate in that regard whilst I was there, but can see it now as sort of that sort of club as such a real focal point of such a strong community, and one where I understand that the fans they truly love it there, and you get that sense. You get a real, as part of a point in my career, then it was a fantastic to go and grow up in both a personal and professional sense.
And just a big old question: do you know what you're going to do after football yet? I'm not writing you off, but when it does come to the time.
No. In short, I'm finishing a degree this summer, and I'm going to go and weigh up what to do. Yeah, and we'll see. I think.
What's the degree in?
Business, and hopefully passing is subject to passing. But yeah, if all things considered, as much as people love being managers and coaches, it's not for me.